Hello, and welcome to FineScale Modeler Weekly.
We have a great show coming up for you, starting with opening some new releases.
That's right, and we're starting with a brand new half-track, Takom's 1/35th scale SdKfz, or for those of you who do not like the way we pronounce it, Sonderkraftfahrzeug 250/1.
More than 4,000 of these light armored vehicles were produced between 1941 and 1943.
This all-new kit breaks the complex hull into an upper section including the hood, the lower sides, and fenders, all of which mount on the lower hull. A nose, rear plate with door, driver's plate, and separate hatches finish the exterior.
The detailed kit includes a pretty complete interior, including the engine and transmission, firewall, driver's seat and controls, radios and dashboard, troop compartment with seating, and personal equipment. Speaking of which, the kit includes a number of stowage items for the fenders, as well as a choice of compartment covers in different positions.
Suspension and running gear highlights include multi-part front tires, sharply molded road wheels, complex drive sprockets, torsion bar road wheel arms, individual link tracks, and a detailed front suspension that should set the front towed-in camber. A nicely sculpted driver is included, and clear plastic supplies the vision blocks.
Photo-etched metal is used for engine screens, tool straps, weapon mounts, and axle and brake covers. Decals provide dash styles and markings for 4 half-tracks, all in overall dark gray on the eastern front in summer 1942. One from Panzer Grenadier Division Großdeutschland, Army Group South, a 24th Panzer Division vehicle in southern Russia, one from the 14th Panzer Division, and finally an 11th Panzer Division SdKfz 250.
This is the first injection molded kit of this vehicle since Dragon released a new one in 1998. It looks good in the box and should be a fun build.
Developed to replace South Korea's aging Phantoms and F-5s, the KF-21 Boramae is a joint project between Indonesia and South Korea.
The multi-role fighter first flew in 2022 and is expected to enter service in 2026.
Academy has brought the aircraft to scale modelers with a 1/72nd scale kit.
Although engineered to be press-fit together without glue, the airframe parts have nice recessed panel lines, and there are full intake trunks, short jet pipes with detailed nozzles. The vertical and horizontal stabilizers are thin, and leading and trailing edge flaps and ailerons are separate, but not posable as molded.
The cockpit is highlighted by molded controls on the side consoles and instrument panel, separate controls, and multi-part seat. The canopy is a clear single part. In contrast, the gear bays are pretty Spartan, but the legs look good and the main wheels are molded apart from the tires. You can pose it gear up on the provided stand.
The aircraft bears a passing resemblance to the F-22, but it has no internal weapon bays, instead hanging 4 MBDA Meteor missiles in recessed bays in the belly, as well as Iris-T air-to-air missiles, JDAM bombs, a targeting pod, and fuel tanks. The biggest disappointment I have with this otherwise great kit is that the markings are only provided as stickers. It includes one of the camo patterns useful for newcomers, and the truth is, it wouldn't be hard to find some South Korean insignia as waterslide decals if you wish. The stickers give markings for 4 of the flight test aircraft.
If you're looking to build a model of a fighter about to enter service that isn't an F-35, this is a nice option.
We looked at IBG's initial 1/72nd scale PZL-11A kit in late 2019.
You can see that video and read Mike Klessig's build review of it at the links in the description.
IBG recently sent us a pair of new boxings. Let's start with the PZL-11C Rare Birds kit.
It features new fuselage halves versus the initial 11A kit with similar fine panel lines. The one-piece upper gull wing looks good, the control surfaces are separate, there is a decent cockpit and engine, and the gear legs can be fitted with wheels or skis depending on the version you are building. Photo-etched brass details the cockpit and engine. TechMod decals give stencils and instrument panel details, as well as markings for 3 aircraft. One, an experimental 2-tone camouflage that was in a combat unit in September 1939, a pre-war fighter in standard Polish Air Force camouflage with skis from the 152nd Fighter Flight from winter 1938 to 39. Optional decals are given to mark this plane as it looked in September 1939, and a what-if scheme with winter distemper camo over the later pattern with skis.
The second kit is a PZL-24A, the export version of the PZL-11 in Turkish service. It features optional fuselage halves for 2 variants of the fighter, new engine parts for the Nome Rhone power plant, some modifications to the cockpit, spatted landing gear, underwing gun pods, and a covered cockpit. As with the other kit, TechMod decals give the stencils and instrument panels and options for 4 Turkish fighters. A neat one with 2-color camo topside and undersides in silver and black, another in the same topside colors with natural metal undersides, and 2 pre-war aircraft in the overall silver scheme that they were delivered in.
If you are looking for inspiration to build either of these kits or IBG's other PZL fighters, check out MMP's PZL Combat Fighters. This 96-page softcover volume is packed with profile art of the PZL-7, PZL-11 in many variants and guises, and the PZL-24.
Another interesting book came across our desks, Italian Soft-Skin Vehicles of the Second World War, Volume 1. This 146-page softcover details motorcycles, cars, and light trucks. There are plenty of photos and illustrations to guide you.
Finally, we have a new German military motorcycle and sidecar.
Tamiya brings us a 1/35th scale zoomed-up KS600.
Highlights include finely molded wheel spokes and a sharp engine with separate cylinders, good frame, thin fenders, well-molded springs, and handlebars.
The sidecar body is molded in thin parts, featuring interior detail, a solid seat, and frame. Figures are included for the bike rider, sidecar passenger, and a standing infantryman. A signpost is included, and there are road signs printed on the box to be cut out. Decals give ID plates for 3 early war gray bikes and 2 later Dunkelgelb vehicles.
The finished bike won't be very big, but the detail and engineering are first rate.
You're not going to say anything about how this would look good on like
On a diorama
or a vignette or, with some scenery, maybe a cat, a dog.
It would look
Chickens?
great. Yeah, chickens would be cool. It would look great on a diorama.
Some trees?
Trees would be good.
Maybe the half track?
Maybe, if you so choose.
Sure. Speaking of the half track, you can find reviews of it and the motorcycle at FineScale.com in the near future.
FineScale Modeler Weekly is brought to you by Hobby Zone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard-to-find hobby tools, and aftermarket modeling needs.
Do you like what you see here and want more? Subscribe to FineScale Modeler magazine. You'll get 6 issues a year crammed with how-to stories from some of the best modelers around the world. Go to finescale.com/YouTube for a special offer for YouTube viewers like you.
To prime or not to prime? That is the question that you've been asking me. At the base level, the reason to prime is to give your paint a uniform surface to go over. Consider it. If you have a multimedia model, let's say you've built a tank and you've got resin on there, you have photo etched metal parts, you have the plastic of the tank itself. Those things are all going to be a bunch of different colors. Applying paint over the top of that, just right to all of that, what you're going to end up with is variations. You're going to end up with variations in adhesion. You're going to end up in variations in paint tone. So you come in with your primer, and that gives you a uniform canvas to apply your paint to so that it's all done basically the same, right? It's all going over the same color. Some people will argue that it's about adhesion and all of this kind of stuff. It can be, but really it's about that uniform color underneath. Let me use this as an example. Let's set this aside. This color here, oh my. I don't know what else to say about the color of this body, but I'm not just going to put paint over this. What if I want this to be white? Or what if I want this to be yellow? Those colors are very translucent, and no matter how many times I hit this with a white paint or a yellow paint, this color of plastic, it's gonna show through. Primer is formulated to be denser than your run-of-the-mill paints, and therefore disguise to hide those underlying colors, like this very atrocious orange or red, however you want to describe it. I could go over this with, say, a white primer, and I might even hesitate going with a white primer. I might for something like this because it's such a strange color that I would go with something like gray just to really make sure to kill this thing down. But that is to disguise that color underneath. And as you can see right there, actually you can see those words right through the plastic. That's something else that primer will do, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it will block the translucency of the plastic underneath. Now, there was a writer for Scale Auto by the name of Bill Coulter, and he wrote an article about how he was trying to match the blue for the famous Sunoco Corvette racer. It was a yellow and blue livery. And over the course of years, he was working to get this color just right. And what he discovered was it had to do with the color of the primer underneath. The color of that primer underneath, it changed the color that went over the top of it. So when you put a primer down, as I said earlier, what that's going to do is it's going to block whatever that plastic color is underneath from shining through. It gives you that uniform canvas to paint on. Something else that primer is going to help you do is notice imperfections that maybe you hadn't seen before. Now, you may have already gone through and you may have filled seams with your favorite putty or super glue or what have you. You may have gone through, you've sanded those places down, you've buffed them, they look good. You put the primer on and then all of a sudden you notice, oh, well, that's not as perfect as what I thought it was. Because before primer, your eyes are still playing tricks. The way that it's sanded, it just hides the imperfection. That primer comes on and suddenly the sheen changes and you're able to see it. What you're able then to do is come back in. You sand that a little bit more. You might put more super glue or more putty back in there. You perfect that out and then you spot prime over the top of it and it disappears. So that's something else that primer is going to help you do above and beyond to giving you that uniform surface. What I can do with this is show you basically everything that I've been talking about. Now, let's first start with the color of this wagon was this very bright red. It was very bright red, and it was also semi-translucent. You could hold it up to the light and the light showed right through it. So I was afraid that if I just went and I put paint down, it wasn't going to be enough to keep light from shining through it. So what I did is I primed the inside of the bed black. And that basically that stopped the translucency right in its tracks. Now, of course, the bed's gonna be filled up, so no one's gonna be seeing in there, but I just wanted to make sure that no light was coming through it. Now, that red, even though this wagon is still going to be red when it's done, red is an interesting color, a lot like yellow and white. Red has a tendency to pull back from corners. And it in itself is somewhat translucent when you apply it. So what I did is I put a nice pink primer down. It looks like a big square hubba bubba. What this pink primer does is it gives a similar tone for the red that I'm going to be putting over it to be applied to. So it's not going to have some off red. It's not going to, that final color isn't going to be affected by some off red. It's not going to be affected by, let's say, a white or a black, especially at these corners where it might pull back a little bit, just a tad, where that white might really show through. This pink is going to help hide any of those possible mistakes that could be made. You know, something that I might miss in finishing. Finally, as you can see here, I had some sink marks in the back. And what I did, and those looked pretty good to me after I had sanded them down, I had buffed them, and then I applied the primer. And after applying the primer, I was able to see, okay, those are not as clean as what I want them to be. So I'm going to go back through, I'm going to spot fill, I'm going to sand those down again, and then I will reapply the primer and see how those look. And I'll make sure that they're nice and smooth and perfect when they're all done before I apply my next coat of actual red paint. Back to the original question, to prime or not to prime. Obviously, I can't make you prime your models, but I do think it's a best practice. For me, it's just one of those things where I do it, it helps me identify mistakes, it helps just unify the entire model, and is a good preparative step to putting on the next coat. It has been a while since we've done a Q&A for video, and we have some questions. And so
I have many questions.
You have
Tim.
many questions. So I'm gonna pull one up here. So this question.
And I have not been primed at all on these questions.
You have not, and neither have I really. I'm just like, woohoo, we've got questions. From Jeff Lotspeech, I think is how we pronounce his name.
Apologies if we mispronounce it.
Yes. So Jeff watched our video about the scale model basics about applying bare metal foil.
Okay.
And Jeff's question is, if you have a model that has chromed plastic parts, can you put the bare metal foil over them directly, or should you first remove the chromed layer? I think you know the answer to this, so since I read it, you can answer it, even though I was the one that hosted that video.
You can, but I'm not sure it's a best practice. I think you're better off stripping it back. For one thing, the chrome adds a layer of thickness to the plastic part. Strip it off and you're down to bare plastic, and that bare metal foil will give you all of the true outline of the original plastic part before it was chrome plated.
Right. And if you need help with stripping chrome off of that part, you can find a tutorial.
Who did the tutorial, Tim?
I think I was the one who did that tutorial. You can find a tutorial for doing that in the links below. Let's go on to another question. Next up, we have Dwayne Barr. Dwayne asks, do resin parts need primer to accept filler putty or paint?
They're not going to need it for the filler. For paint, it's probably a good idea. More than anything, because you are probably adding those resin parts to another plastic kit, and it's just going to help paint adhere better and cover all of those, different materials. The one thing you're going to want to do with resin parts before filling, gluing, or painting is make sure that you wash them in mild, soapy, slightly warm water to get rid of any of that mold release agent. That, as the name implies, is designed to have things not stick to it, and that includes paint, filler, and possibly glue.
Right.
So do that, then you can use your normal fillers and putties, super glue, epoxy, all of that should work on it. But it's a good idea to go ahead and prime those resin parts before you start applying the paint.
We did a scale model basics about pre-mixed mud versus making your own mud.
Right. Yes.
And we have a question from a viewer who wonders if you can take real dirt and mix it with white glue and therefore create mud by mixing the dirt and the white glue and then put that onto your model. What do you think?
I guess in theory you could. We see modelers use real dirt, particularly on diorama bases.
Yes.
I wouldn't recommend it. If you're going to go the route of using real dirt, I would use it to add texture to like acrylic gel medium with a little pastel for color, and then add the dirt for that texture to give it some.
Yeah,
pop.
and I would add that dirt after applying it to the base. I wouldn't be mixing it in necessarily.
You could do it either way, but yeah, it's probably better to add it a little bit later. Plus, this is one of those things where you probably want to do it in layers so that you're not overdoing the texture so that it starts getting super chunky on the bottom of your model.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, real dirt, sure, but again, it's...
My main concern with mixing the dirt into the PVA is that, yeah, you'd make a slurry, right? But you would lose any sort of texture. It would end up having more of a texture of white glue than it would the dirt itself.
Yeah, and white glue is, particularly watered down white glue is really hard to do any texture with. That's why people use the gel medium, because that has some natural bulk to it, so you can sculpt and you know, kind of stipple and all that kind of stuff and give it a more natural texture. Whereas white glue, I don't think works that well for that.
So our answer to that is probably not.
No. I do have a question for you, Tom.
Oh God. Okay. I don't have any idea what he's about to ask me. I'm already married, Aaron.
No,
I can't do that.
No, it's more controversial than that.
Oh!
X-Wing or Viper? Which one's better?
Wow, what a way to slip that in there. Okay. X-Wing.
Okay. Any particular reason, or are you just going to go with X-Wing for, like, favorite Star Wars?
Okay, fine. If we're going to, the X-Wing for me definitely has sentimental value.
Absolutely.
Okay, because Star Wars is very near and dear to my heart. Okay, so it was, so there is that. But I just like the design of it. I never liked, even as a kid, I never liked the idea of like the cockpit of your airplane or your starfighter or whatever at the nose. I understand why it's at the nose, okay, right? Because you want good visibility and you're out there in the front of it and all of that stuff. But I liked it always tucked back, right? Which that design is shared with the Viper,
right?
Because the Viper was designed after the X-Wing, and it mimics the X-Wing.
And both of them were conceptualized by Ralph McQuarrie. So yep.
So, but I just like the placement of the cockpit. I like the overall shape, and then the wings. And I don't care if it makes any sense or not, whether or not they open up or they close down. It doesn't matter. Just that opening. It has a different attack look when it's going. Yeah, the whole thing. I like the X-Wing better. My
question was not about logic. If we're going to start arguing the logic of these either vehicle, because what is the turbo burst on a? I mean,
boost.
It's
the turbo boost. What was it? In the
turbo blast.
Turbo blast was the. I'm like, no, that just sounds like something bad that happened to you in the bathroom.
I'm going to press this button and whee, this thing's going to go.
But so the thing about the turbo boost is that it is guaranteed to get you out of any trouble.
Okay.
Anytime, as long as you have it. As long as you have the ability to use it, it will get you out of trouble. You will outrun all Cylons. Sort
of like the hyperdrive in the X-Wing. In theory.
Maybe? I don't.
So I'm going to.
You're going to go the other way.
I'm going to argue just a counterpoint, and that is, while I love the X-Wing, and if I, as a 7-year-old, when I first saw Star Wars. I wanted to fly the X-Wing, but there's something about the way the Viper is built. It's compact. It's very clean. It looks like a hot rod. It looks like you took a spaceship and
hot rods are compact, but they aren't necessarily clean.
Well, no, but this one it's cleaner than the X-Wing, in my. And I'm not saying that I don't like the X-Wing.
Yeah, but that's because the X-Wing comes from the used universe, and that isn't.
Well, it sort of is.
Not really. It's a different aesthetic. It's a completely different ship aesthetic.
Sure.
Ship design.
And I actually like both of them, but if I had to pick to go into combat, I might pick the Viper.
Okay.
So. So anyway.
You lose.
Really? You're saying that a Viper couldn't go up against TIE fighters? I'm not saying they're going up against each other. That's not my point.
I am not taking this. I'm not going any further with this hypothetical. That's like there was a huge discussion back in the day about whether or not the Enterprise or a Star Destroyer would win. And it all comes down to whether or not Darth Vader is on that Star Destroyer and uses the Force, except that he can't use the Force if he's in the Enterprise universe, Star Trek universe. I'm not doing this anymore. Anyway, thank you for joining us for this absurd ending to this episode of FineScale Modeler Weekly. I'm Tim.
If you have an opinion about anything we have said, drop us a line.
Oh my God.
Also, if you have questions, please drop us a question. Questions@finescale.com.
Yeah, good
Editor
for you to
at finescale.com.
mention that rather than. Oh my God. Yeah, they're gonna have opinions that we're both bozos.
I'm sorry, that would be news to them, how? Anyway, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
More than 4,000 of these. I just said it wrong. I didn't forget.
I want to go home. I want my mommy.
The multi-roll.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I think I was second guessing the end of my line anyway.
I was so surprised you got through it, I forgot my line.
You're like,
That's exactly it. I'm like going, okay.
She's doing it. She's doing
went to
it.
Indonesia first, but she got to South. Yes. Okay,
And shoot.
Because I said so. And there you go. You're gonna prime because I said so, and that's it. That's the end of this TA. We are out. You don't need to know anything else. We're just done. We're done. But at the base, that's not what I said earlier.